Welcome back to the Marketing Madmen on Extra 106.3. Nick Constantino here with Evan and Lisa Benson, and we've gotten to it. We're going to talk about pause now. So you guys both had backgrounds that for whatever reason, and you think you've set up the reasons really well, decided it was time to let's go do something different. Let's go out on our own. Let's go figure this out. Okay. Most people, when they do that, think that all of the work is done because they made that hard decision, and they kind of half cock it and kind of just go in and they kind of like, let's do this. Okay. But it seems like there's much more due diligence involved in this process. Mm-hmm. So before we get to the fun of the location and what's going on now, talk about some of that process, and let's go into this under the guise of people who are in this position now that feel like they want to leave what they're doing and start on their own, how much time it actually takes to get this right. So Lisa, why don't we start with you? Talk a little bit about what you went through and what the work was to just find this and how nerve-wracking it is to just find what the right opportunity is.
Yeah, I mean, I think first you started with like every time you're getting ads. I said, as soon as we decided this is something we want to do, and it actually came from a very personal place. I had psoriasis from my daughter that I got during COVID. Yep. My dad just was diagnosed with Alzheimer's, sadly. And then Evan started, accountants and CPAs and that industry, very type A, stressed out all the time. He started learning about the benefits of cold plunge. And so that brought us to like, you know what, maybe this is something we should pursue. Immediately, I just call it Big Brother. We started getting ads all the time about franchise. And so from that process, that became, number one, what looked cool, what looked like it aligned with what we wanted to be true for ourselves. And then it was phone call, reading, conversations with so many people. I would say that was like a year-long process, just like talking.
At least a couple, six or so months.
Yeah. And again, this is our journey because I know a lot of people. We've spoken to a lot of other owners who are like, yeah, I thought it was cool and went for it. We took the time to learn about different brands and have conversations with franchisees that belong to them. And so that was just a very long process of notes, and then discovering themes and understanding what challenges they face, but what opportunities they saw for the future. Yeah. And then we came to learn about Pause, and Pause, honestly, what we consider was a throwaway. We're just going to go look for our due diligence.
It usually happens that way. Yeah. And the reason I think is because sometimes, especially when you go through a process of when you're constantly being sold, the one that sells the least hard is the one you go towards, because you know what, look, whether you guys, first of all, you were around kids all day that were probably BSing you into what's wrong with them, right? You were in the CPA world, so you learned to see through the fake numbers and look at the things. So salespeople don't have to sell something if there's a good product, right? Like you guys see this building. In most of my sales pitches, it starts with, hey, you see that big Atlanta B over there, the Atlanta Braves? I go, they trust me. That's a pretty good indication you should too. Mm-hmm. That's the whole sales process. And I'm not trying to be that guy, but I'm like, that's the most prominent team probably in the country. And they've been with me for 15 years. Yeah. There's probably a reason that's happening. Yep. So, but that's the opposite of the really hard-handed, we should go now. That's the opposite. When someone gives that, a lot of times you've already been through the ringer from everybody else overselling that, wait a second, these guys aren't selling that hard. Mm-hmm. We thought this was going to be a meeting, but this is the one with the most potential. So, all right, so we got to Pause. Evan, why don't you pick it up? So what was the process like? So they're reaching out to you. There's a lot of negotiations involved. They're probably giving you demographics. You're trying to match it up with what you know about Atlanta. Talk about how you found the location and how that all got set up.
Yeah, so to Lisa's point, so we looked at pretty much every franchise brand in the space. Okay. And then we
how many? This is not the world I know. How many are there?
There's probably about 10. Okay. 10 that are.
And all I imagine over the past couple of years are all relatively new.
They've all been, they're all relatively new. And even before we got to franchising, we kind of said, hey, do we want to do this ourselves? We just want to create our own brand. And we felt like speed to market, was pretty important. And then
I have to imagine technology. Yeah, we'll probably have that conversation, but every one of these modern franchises is centered around a piece of technology that would be either exponentially expensive to do on your own, or would be such an adaptive process it would take years to get the right way.
Yeah, and the thing that was exciting about Pause was, they were punching, way ahead of their weight class. Okay. They're only in California, but we would be talking to people here that had been to Pause, had heard of Pause.
But let's talk for a second how far ahead of the curve California is in the holistic space, okay? Yep. So I lived out there for a little while. I had an ex-girlfriend whose mother was like she's like an alchemist. And she was like making, this is 20 years ago, 25 years ago. I mean, they were doing colonics. It was Bikram yoga. They were so far ahead of the curve. I didn't hear about any of that stuff here till almost recently. And it was 20 5 years ago I was in California.
That's right.
So just the general vibe over there is so different for this stuff. And again, I have to imagine that the film industry and people coming over here helped the adoption come over here. But I think it's important to say California and Atlanta are very different places.
That's right.
Yes.
They are very different in wellness and what people do and what people look at and how people manage stress. It's also different. Like most people are seeing a therapist there, and like just the whole world is so different. So I just think it's important for the listeners to understand, like, these are not like we ran down the street and it's just like from Birmingham to Atlanta and we're in the same place. These are totally different places.
That's right.
All right, carry on. Sorry for the interruption.
Yeah, no, but that's a good point, because what you see is a lot of trends start in California and then they make their way east. And so I think you've seen a lot in this health and wellness space that the same thing has happened. Two of the major franchise brands, have started in California and they've kind of made their way out. So I think that's a good point that you brought up. But in terms of our process, so once we had decided on pause, we went out, we flew to LA, we met with the leadership team, we kind of went through, we visited sites out there. They had some really good relationships here locally from a real estate perspective, so they connected us with a local broker, and then it was a process of going to the sites, vetting the sites. We were very, very strict with our real estate requirements because we want to be where our customers are.
Sure.
And we think Avenue East Cobb is where our customers are. That particular location was also attractive to us because that's where I grew up.
Okay,
So I went to Pope High School.
I was going to ask that question. Okay.
I was an athlete. I played Division I football at UConn. So
Cool.
I got a lot of connections to that particular space and that particular
You were in the wrong
community.
sport. You were in the wrong sport at UConn. It's a basketball sport. But I'm just kidding.
We did okay.
I'm just kidding.
We did okay. We did okay. But I think that was important. That community connection.
Yeah.
But also, the Avenue. They've gone through a whole redevelopment. And so we thought that was super exciting. So we looked at a lot of spaces.
Yeah.
We thought the Avenue was really the best fit. And then once we had, the site, then there's a whole nother negotiation process with the landlord of trying to negotiate the lease. And you got to have attorneys involved in going through all of that.
Yeah, you're trying to tell the landlord, look, we're drawing people in too, right? This is a benefit to everybody because we have a constant flow. We're busy all the time, so we're trying to bring people in. What is the value to the other people around here? It's a negotiation. And before I get to Lisa, are you from here also?
No, I'm not. I'm from Connecticut.
From Connecticut, okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, I think...
If I can just add one thing, because again, very different perspectives. I'm coming like a deer in headlight is how I
where in
describe my
Connecticut,
journey.
by the way? Are we talking New York City, Connecticut, or are we talking Connecticut?
I was born in New York City, and then we
like
moved
Hartford,
when I was
where were we
10,
talking?
Brooklyn.
Okay.
Yeah, and then we moved when I was about 10 to Connecticut.
But New York metro area, Connecticut.
Danbury.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Exactly.
I just want to make sure.
Yes.
I don't know to establish these things because
So
Connecticut
close,
changes
close
very
enough.
quickly when
Yes,
you leave
it's
and you
true.
go up and
Absolutely right.
Yes.
UConn is the cows. Danbury is not.
So I was a Queens kid that moved to Long Island. So Queens to Long Island is the same thing as Brooklyn to Connecticut.
Yeah.
You go to a little further and you're doing a little bit more roundabout way, but really we're probably waving at each other across the Long Island Sound. Okay, keep on. Go on.
I was just going to add to, as I've been saying, when you're going to these different sites. So for me, not having any of this experience, it definitely was a feeling. You go into a space and you have to use all of your senses to kind of like determine whether this is right. Something feels off, stuff doesn't feel off, and then talk it through depending on your communication style. But for me, it was totally talking it through because it was like something was not right. And what was it? And so just really paying attention to what's around you and not being, because some people lay out the red carpet. And so it's very easy to be like, wow, they're so nice. But really you have to look more at that.
Feel is the word. And from my feel for Atlanta, the difference between, because the natural reaction is probably Buckhead or Brookhaven or something like that, or Dunwoody. But what I have found is the Roswells, the East Cobbs, those tend to be newer money. And they are more open to doing things with their money than the old Buckhead people who are rich and cheap. So I don't know a nicer way to say that. So I'm just going to come out with it. So I have found, and this radio station has 180 clients in a given month. So I talk to a lot of people, and everybody that is in an experimental space that tries to go in and bully their way into Brookhaven or Buckhead fails much quicker than the people who are going to the Roswells of the world, the East Cobb, the Woodstock, those areas where people are more open to explore this stuff, and families and things along those lines. So I think it was a smart move. Tell us a little bit about what drew to that location. Obviously, the landlord's giving you a bunch of demographics of who the people are. What are the other stores in there? What was it that really caught your attention?
Well, it was all the above. I mean, so Avenue right now has made a huge investment in the community by redeveloping the Avenue to really a world-class destination. So that was exciting for us in the timing with that. Also, there's a lot of what we like to call accelerator brands. So there are, I talked about wanting to be where our customer is. So there's a lot of brands there that we feel our customers like to frequent in that space. So that was also a very important. Parking is very tricky with some of these places. Maybe a great location, but there's no parking. So there's a lot of parking at the Avenue. And then similar to how we vetted the leadership team at Pause, we also vetted the leadership team at the Avenue. And they've got a world-class team there that's there to support tenants. We have a great working relationship with them. So it was really all of the above. Obviously, the demographics are wonderful. The incomes are wonderful. It's just a busy place. It gets a lot of foot traffic. So all of those things, I think, contributed to us wanting to move forward at that space.
Yeah, and I think the point is here is there's so much that goes into this, and I think that everyone always sees the tip of the iceberg, and they're like, oh, they just started.
Yep.
So I do want to take the time because there's a Stretch Lab as an example of a newer franchise, and I've gone for a year now, and there's a guy there named Zavi, and he'll get this, so I'll send it over to him. The establishment as a franchise was fine, but I found the guy that was right, and I mean he was an ex D1 athlete, and just stretching and putting that hour a week to myself to go do those things has been completely transformative.
Oh yeah.
So it's annoying, the tech doesn't work the way it's supposed to sometimes, but I'm okay with that stuff, but it's also still about the people. And I'm not going because of the app. The app makes it convenient to cancel and book, and it really was the thing probably the first 2 or 3 times, but the people that you have greeting, those fundamentals will never change.
Yeah.
So talk about, we found the location, now we got to start staffing this puppy.
Yeah.
In an industry that neither of you have been in. Talk about the staffing, and then I promise we're going to get to the fun stuff and talk about what they actually do.
Yeah. So once we found the location, Pause has a really good playbook for how to open locations. So before you even get to hiring, we have a very aggressive grassroots campaign that we do within the community.
Okay.
So probably for about 3 to 4 months prior to our opening, we were out in the community. We were tabling, we were doing events where we would bring in complimentary services to do cold plunges, compression. We would be partnering with other businesses.
Yeah. And they probably have a geographic area that they give you, hey, the likelihood of someone coming in from 30 miles away is not it. Yep. So here's your geographic area that most people will come from.
Very targeted with being rooted in the community.
Yeah.
So we did that for about 3 or 4 months, and we probably did nearly 100 events.
Yeah.
You build up a pretty significant email list, contact list.
Yeah.
And so by the time you get to opening, you've already got a lot of people that know we're coming, that are interested.
Yeah, and that's that word of mouth advertising. That's by far the strongest form of it.
It's the strongest form.
Excruciating, exhausting.
So tiring.
So tiring. It feels like the problem that you feel like out of each individual interaction, you didn't get enough, but when you look at them cumulatively, you're like, okay, this was worth it. But again, that's not how people think. We're always thinking in the moment, and in that moment, it's like, oh my God, 3 people came up. What's going on? But those 3 people multiply. They're so not used to talking to people in person and seeing that they're probably like, but also it takes a banner ad 44 times for someone to see it to have any impact. You get that impact immediately.
Yeah.
And then you're in the community and you can say that and like, oh yeah, you know what? I saw those guys. They are part of the community, not just saying it like everybody else does.
That's right. Yeah. So, we viewed, a lot of other businesses that just open the door and hope people come in. We took a very aggressive approach 3 to 4 months out to start building that community connection, getting out there, networking with other businesses. And that's been great for us as we open really strong. So that was really important leading up to getting to open. The construction process for brick and mortar is not easy.
Yeah.
Permitting,
I'm sure, is fun.
Permitting is challenging. We are the only business in Cobb County that has health department approval for our cold plungers and our float tanks.
Wow.
That was not easy to get.
Yeah. But that's immediate barrier to entry. Because now all of a sudden it's making it harder for competitors
for other people to do it.
So that in itself, if it's promoted the right way, because you still have to get that message out there, but is powerful. Barrier to entry is one of the biggest parts of business that is underspoken of, because if somebody just comes in and copies your exact thing, then you're competing over the same bottom of the funnel activities and people searching on Google. It's hard to market. But if you have a competitive advantage, you can start top of the funnel because you're automatically differentiating yourself.
It's a huge competitive advantage because people will come in, and they do this now. They come in, they look at the cold plunge.
Yes,
is it clean? What do you guys do? And we're like, look, we have very stringent hygiene protocols. This has been approved by the health department. And it gives people some more comfort that, we're not just some place that popped up and threw some plunges and some water.
So it's not like when I was in Mexico and I got my tongue pierced and I was like, a frozen margarita will fix everything. It's not like that.
It's not like that.
I just wanted to make sure.
It's not like that.
I just wanted to make sure.
Yeah.
True story, by the way.
Yeah. So that process, around permitting and construction, that was also part of it. But in terms of staffing, because you asked about staffing, once we got there, again, the franchise was very helpful in terms of giving us guidelines on how many people do we need.
And these are modern companies with data. And this is probably where you geeked out, because they probably came to you not with a, hey, John in Encinitas said it needs this. They're like, all right, here's our data. Here's this where they're coming in from. Here's the kind of people that work best. You're probably getting data that you're like, okay, this is helping me paint a much easier picture than going in blind.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah, and we were looking for people with a lot of hospitality experience.
Yeah.
Have you worked at Four Seasons, Chick-fil-A?
Yeah.
Places that are really, really high on customer service. Because I think you made a point earlier around it is a business, but we're in the people business.
Yeah.
We're making people feel good, look good, live better, and you got to have that personal connection.
And I imagine, so one of the things for me when people talk about hospitality that they don't understand is empowerment.
Yep.
Because you guys are now so invested in the business and there's local owners, you're able to empower people, right? Because the Four Seasons is the Four Seasons, the Ritz-Carlton is Ritz-Carlton, because each employee had like $1,000 per se to always make something right for somebody.
Yep.
Everyone says that they want to be good customer service, but they don't empower their people to be able to make those things good. Stuff happens, man. You're talking about somebody who thinks, what if they jump into a frozen cold plunge and then go into, like, they just not ready for it? It's jarring. You got to be prepared. Be like, okay, look, I understand that was jarring. Why don't you try this service? This might be a little bit more your speed. If those employees aren't empowered to do that, then that's the problem. So I think one of the things that the best companies have done a really good job of is that they put people in a position and empower them to succeed if something goes wrong. Just lying to yourself saying nothing's going to go wrong is just a foolish endeavor.
That's right.
This world, something's going to go wrong.
And every customer that comes through our doors, one of the things that our team is trained to ask is, why are you here? How can we help you feel better? Because somebody may be coming in for, recovery, and somebody may be coming in they want to sleep better. Somebody may be coming in because they want to relax. So we try to understand that and then direct them to the services that address that. So that's really important.
I'll go into the staffing part, which is, again, a question that Nick asked. So I did a lot of talking to a tremendous amount of people, whether it was through computer first and then it was through screen, computer, we did Zoom, and then we would meet in person. And so it was, I think we streamlined the process as we learned more and more about what we were looking for. So yes, we totally got a lot of support around, here's the kind of person. But again, I'm going to bring back to you feeling. What was my feeling when I spoke to them? One of the strategies that I used is to be absolutely transparent. This is what I'm looking for. This is what we are going to build. Not trying to build, this is what we're going to build and what we want to be true. And if that's not for you, that is okay.
Get it out of the way.
We do not want people who clock in and clock out. Getting a job, that's real life. Everybody needs to earn money. And that's why you're here, right? Because you want the opportunity to earn money. But this is going to be more than that. And you need to understand that. And if that's too much for you, then that's completely fine. But if you're entering, you need to know that.
And that's where a lot of the, there's probably been, I would call it 3 or 4 generations of franchisees. The last generation of franchisees, that's where they broke it, right? That's like the Massage Envies of the world. And those are the ones that got so big. The owners were owning 30 or 40 to make money. And you cannot manage people if you're having 30 to 40. Then the one person you put in charge of each location has no skin in the game. They're not empowered to make decisions. So you saw it, and that was the difference. The only reason that I'm at this stretch lab is because the same guy's been there. He leaves, I'm out. And I can't make that clear, and I do all the time. They probably still don't believe me, but so I think that's a really good point. All right, so we've lollygagged about it. We've talked under the iceberg, which again is not the fun stuff. So let's talk about some services.
So
I missed my appointment. I'm going to get up there to do a contrast, and it's only because I believe in all of the benefits of it. I had a Finnish girlfriend whose grandfather made saunas, and I know that they've been doing cold plunges into saunas for thousands of years. So let's start with that one. Talk about contrast therapy. Talk about, obviously athletes are doing it. You see that stuff, but talk about some of the benefits and talk about the kind of people that you would refer to go that route.
Yeah. So before I talk about contrast therapy, let me also just, Pause is a one-stop shop for health optimization and health wellness. So contrast therapy is one of basically 7 services that we offer.
And I love that, by the way.
Yeah.
7 is the number. It's like, look, we could add more, but then we're starting to get to the stuff that isn't going to really help you.
Right.
That's right.
Right? You see these menus, and
Right.
a spa in a hotel is a great example. How do you need 74 services? Like, pick 6 that you're really good at and just stop. But that's it. 7 is like, that's the number to me. 10, a dozen is you're starting to get too high. You have flexibility. Maybe 1 or 2 come about. You can add 1 or 2, but you're not at a level where it's intimidating. You're not at a level where you're trying to be something you're not.
That's right.
All science backed. That's the whole point.
Yeah,
exactly. So the 7 that we have are all science-backed. So sauna, cold plunge, we offer flotation therapy, LED light therapy, compression. We have a medical arm that does IVs and drips and vitamin shots, and we also offer cryotherapy. And that's one of the unique things about Pause is, our design is to allow you to be able to basically address your whole self, your whole well-being, and not just one thing. So you do have some of our competitors that may do just sauna or just cryotherapy or just IV. We try to be a one-stop shop for folks. So they can come into our place and we can address a whole variety of different issues or challenges that you may be having.
Yeah, I think it also allows you to be proactive with wellness, not reactive.
That's correct.
Right? So you go to cryotherapy in certain situations, but now you're being proactive. So if you go in a week and you're not having X problem, then maybe you try something else because it will help with this. So again, we've become too reactive as a country for healthcare. We are not being proactive enough. So being that way, you're not just saying, here's the one, you have to come in and use it when this happens. You're being proactive. This is how this could help you overall. So you don't have to use all these services.
That's right.
That's important, I think.
To answer your question, to get to contrast therapy, because that is our most popular. That's the one people see all over social media and all the excitement there. You said, who do I recommend it to? Everybody.
Yeah.
It is. You're really missing out if you haven't experienced contrast therapy. You talked about people always seeking dopamine. Which is true, but look, you can come into our place and get in the cold plunge for 3 minutes. And when you get out, your dopamine is going to be
But
up
you're also got
250%.
endorphins. You got the other parts of the chemical, the other reactions
going up.
The problem with dopamine is that you see, dopamine is just dopamine pretty much is like, get out of the pool, right? It's freezing. My body doesn't like it here. So your dopamine's what's saying, like, you get out, but you fight that. So then all of a sudden your body relaxes, and then you have all the endorphins and all those other things coming. The problem is when we talk only dopamine, when people are flooding only that dopamine receptor, because that is the anticipation thing.
Correct.
So I want to make sure dopamine's not a bad thing, but we've psychologically rigged our brains to only seek after, and there's no answer to it. And that's when you're caught in that feedback loop of where addicts come from and everything.
That's right.
But completely different time. But that being said, we talked ourselves through this entire segment. So we're going to come back. We're going to go into cryotherapy. We're going to go into all this stuff. You've been listening to the Marketing Madmen on Extra 106.3, and we'll be right back.